I never used to believe in ghosts or the supernatural. That was until Valentine's Day 2 years ago when I experienced something that will haunt me for the rest of my life. It was supposed to be a romantic day with my boyfriend, Ryan. We had been together for 3 years, and this was our first Valentine's Day together. We had planned to go for a romantic dinner at our favorite Italian restaurants, and then spend the evening at a cozy cabin in the woods. As we drove towards the cabin, I couldn't help but feel excited about the surprise Ryan had promised me. He had been acting strange all day, saying that he had something special planned for me. I couldn't wait to see what it was. As we arrived at the cabin, the sun had already set. The cabin was surrounded by tall trees, and the only source of light was the flickering street lamp on the side of the road. Ryan parked the car, and we made our way to the front door of the cabin. As soon as we stepped inside, I noticed something was off. The atmosphere was heavy, and there was a strange smell in the air. I could feel my skin crawling with discomfort. Ignoring my unease, I followed Ryan further into the cabin. He led me to the living room where he had set up a candlelit dinner for us. The dim light from the candles cast eerie shadows on the walls, making me feel even more on edge. I brushed it off as my imagination playing tricks on me. We sat down to enjoy our dinner, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that we were being watched. I glanced around the room, but there was no one there. Ryan must have noticed my unease as he reached out to hold my hand and assure me that everything was alright. As we finished our dinner, Ryan excused himself to get something from the bedroom. I sat there in the dimly lit room, trying to calm my nerves. That's when I suddenly heard a faint sound coming from upstairs. It was a soft whisper, almost like someone calling my name. I felt a shiver run down my spine. I called out Ryan, thinking it was him trying to play a prank on me. But there was no answer. Suddenly, I heard footsteps coming downstairs. I stood up to greet Ryan, but there was no one there. Panic started to set in as I realized I was alone in the cabin. I quickly made my way to the bedroom, hoping to find Ryan there. But as I opened the door, I was greeted by an empty room with the window curtains blowing in the wind. I frantically searched the entire cabin, calling out Ryan's name with no response. My heart was racing, and I could feel a sense of dread wash over me. That's when I heard it again, the faint whisper calling my name. I followed the sound, my feet moving on their own accord towards the back of the cabin. As I reached the back of the door, I noticed that it was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and stepped outside, only to be greeted by complete darkness. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I stood there in the pitch-black darkness. Suddenly, I saw a faint light in the distance. It was coming from the tree line behind the cabin. Without thinking, I started to walk towards it, my mind filled with fear and confusion. As I got closer, the light grew brighter, and I could see that it was coming from a small clearing in the forest. I paused at the edge of the clearing, my eyes widening in horror at the sight in front of me. In the center of the clearing was a circle of candles, their flames flickering in the cold night air. And in the middle of the circle stood a figure dressed in a long white dress with a veil covering her face. I could feel my muscles freeze in fear as I realized that the whisper I had been hearing was coming from this figure. With trembling hands, I reached out to push back the veil and reveal the face of the person standing before me. But before I could do so, the figure let out a blood-curdling scream and rushed towards me, her hands outstretched. I ran as fast as I could, my heart racing with fear. I could feel the cold burning in my lungs as I ran towards the cabin. I could hear the sound of the figure's footsteps stepping closer behind me. Just as I reached the cabin, I feel a sharp pain in my ankle as I fell to the ground. I turn around to see the figure standing over me. Her face, now revealed to be that of a woman in her late 20s, her eyes filled with a sense of rage and sorrow. She grabbed me by the shoulders, her grip tightening as she whispered in a haunting voice. "You shall not come here. This is my domain, and I will never let anyone leave." Panic and terrified, I tried to push her off, but she was too strong. Just then, Ryan appeared out of nowhere, holding a lit candle in his hand. As soon as he reached us, the figure disappeared into the thin air, leaving me shaking and crying on the ground. Ryan helped me to my feet, and we quickly made our way to the cabin. I was still shaking with fear and my ankle throbbed with pain. Ryan explained that he had gone to the bathroom when he came back, and he couldn't find me anywhere in the cabin. He had heard my screams coming from outside and had followed the sound, only to find me being attacked by a woman. We called the police and they searched the surrounding area, but they couldn't find any trace of the mysterious woman. Ryan and I left the cabin that night, our romantic weekend turning into a terrifying nightmare. After that night, I did some research and found out that the cabin we were staying at had a dark history. It was once the home of a young woman who had been jilted by her lover and driven into madness. She had hung herself in the woods and her spirit was said to haunt the area, seeking revenge on those who dared to come near her former home. So, this Valentine's Day, as I sit at home alone, I couldn't help but think about that fateful night and wonder if the woman's spirit will ever find peace. And I pray that no one else would have to experience the horror I went through, all because of a romantic surprise gone wrong.